Transferable skills.
From Cackle Media, this is Transferable Skills. I'm Noah Mishkin. Today's guest is Mariam Nusrat, whose skills journey is a testament of innovation and adaptability, going from economist into gaming founder. I hope you enjoy. So excited to have Mariam Nusrat here today on our show. Thank you for taking the time out and being here today. Your background is super exciting. What you're doing now is, I don't know, maybe more exciting to me. Today, we're going to explore your skills journey and the journey you've been on. So thank you for being here today. Welcome to the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Noah, for having me. I'm super excited. I've been thinking about the skills and transferable skills, so I'm excited to dive into it.
All right, let's talk about it. Where did your career begin?
So I'm an economist by academic training. I spent 15 years at the World Bank. This was a dream job for my dad. This was a job that I planned when I was in third grade, where he put the logo of the World Bank in front of me. And he's like, you're going to do your bachelor's in econ, your master's in econ, and then you're going to go work at the World Bank. So very different from the typical Asian parents where it's like doctor, engineer, boom, that's it. Those are the two options. Economic policy, public policy was something that was kind of ingrained in me. That's what I thought. That's a path I was always going to be on. And that's a path I ended up check. Like the places, the universities he wanted me to go to, I did all of those, threw in another master's degree, and ended up at the World Bank as an economist working in education policy across 22 different countries.
Very fascinating and unique exposure into economics, finance. So what was it about either economics that was so important to your father and that you kind of grew into? And more specifically, what was it about the World Bank versus any other economics, opportunity, finance, a traditional bank or investment banking? What was it about the World Bank that was really a draw for your family?
Having grown up in a country like Pakistan, you truly understand public policy and the impact of international aid. World Bank is actually, I almost look at it less finance, less econ, and more public policy, more development and international development. So I feel like my dad was himself in public policy, in the government, and he saw the impact that these in development loans or $8 have on countries like Pakistan. And I think that's like, being able to say, hey, you work in policy, but not just impacting one country, but imagine if you could impact dozens of countries in one go. And I think that was something that was really powerful. And I feel like from the beginning, there was this sense of a very global impact that was very attractive to my dad. Like not just, hey, impact the circle, impact the community, but go change the world. He would hold my fist and he'd be like, the world is in your hands. I believe that so strongly, that the world's in my hands. And I think that this idea that you can truly end poverty and, enhance shared prosperity, which is their mission across the world, was very, very attractive.
Was your father, do you attribute a lot of your success to his support and push?
I do think so. This idea of hard work is correlated to results, and there are literally no barriers. For him, it was like there's no geographical barriers, no gender, no color, no ethnicity, no religious, nothing. Like the only thing that matters is the hard work you put into it. And those barriers also went into skills, right? It was always like, he was like, doesn't matter what you train in. You can pivot anytime if you put enough hard work. You can learn anytime. You can learn something new. So I really do believe that ability to just be like, a goal is within my reach is something that's very deeply ingrained in me. And it's like, if I just work hard enough, I'm going to get in. But I think what comes with hard work is resilience and failure. And that was something that followed a little bit later. I wasn't programmed for it, but I think like part of that is when things don't work out, you get up again and you keep going. So yeah, absolutely. But these are hard programmed.
I'm curious about maybe some of those examples. If you can recall back to even the smallest memory, if there was a small setback that maybe you still think about and you learn from. And as you get older, those setbacks could be more impactful and bigger risk. So I'm curious, like, what are those small things from when you were growing up that still rattle around in your brain that you're thinking about that you learned from?
Again, when my dad laid out this path for me, he's like, you're going to go to LUMS, which is a business school in Pakistan. Then you're going to go to London School of Economics, and then you're going to go work at the World Bank. So it was like very, very specific, exactly where I had to go to and which ones I had to do. And one of the things that happened out of high school was I did not get into the college. I mean, I got a conditional offer and then I got rejected because I didn't make the final cut to the college where he wanted me to do my bachelor. And that was the first time that I had let my dad down. That was the first time that I had not met this goal of like, I was like, and I had almost started taking success for granted, even if I wasn't put in the same amount of hard work and everything. And I think that that was the time where I had to redo the whole plan, right? Like I had to sit down and say, all right, this didn't work out, but just because point A didn't work out, the goal is still there. World Bank's still there. All of that is still there. So I actually flipped the full order. I did my bachelor's as an external degree from Pakistan, the London School of Economics program, which was like at double the hard level because I didn't have the same teachers, wasn't in the same classroom, but did the same degree all the way sitting in Pakistan. And then ended up going to LUMS, the same college my dad wanted me to go to for my master's. And then ended up going to GW for my second master's degree and still ended up at the World Bank, right? So I think like the path was way harder than the path that my dad had laid out for me. And it was ridden with disappointments. And I mean, I think this is a skill that I really have honed for myself is when you have a problem, do you just look at it as, well, am I now what to do? Or is it like, hey, this is one roadblock, but the goal is still there. The path is still there. The journey continues. How do I now re-engineer this, plumb this plump, like, go through the re-engineering a little bit differently?
Yeah, too often we're focused on the parts that get you to the end goal. And the goal isn't the steps to get you to the end. The goal is the goal. It's the end. And so sometimes the disappointment is simply that we set these expectations on this is the only path to getting there. To me, what's more important is getting to the end goal, not did we get there in the exact way that we had modeled out, envisioned, and prepared for.
Right.
It's about making these pivots and accepting.
I think it is truly the thing that has just helped me the most in my life has been, I'll get up. I'll be okay. Right? Like literally, as long as I'm not dead, I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And I think that resilient muscle, I arrived in the US 12 years ago with $400 in my bank account. I didn't know anyone and I didn't know how to apartment hunt. Going from that to like now, calling this home and having a very comfortable life, a whole curveball can get thrown at you. And as long as you know how to deal with life's curveballs, as long as you take it part of the journey, because what goes up comes down, what goes down has to go up. That's the cool skill.
Okay, let's talk about curveballs because you mentioned not getting into your first choice, the choice of your father for college for the undergraduate program, but you did get through it in a different way.
Right.
So not getting into the program in the traditional way in person there, you went a roundabout and you still went through the program, but you described it as being essentially twice as hard as maybe the traditional model.
Right.
Do you think that actually set you up and build skills that you now applied to your career because you had to learn in a different way and because it was twice as hard, and some of the skills that maybe it gave you a little more grit than what you would have acquired going through the traditional program?
I truly believe, Noah, the curveballs in my life have been a greater determinant of my success in my career path than if life had been easy.
Yeah.
I mean, I've gone through hardships, and whether it's like, oh, you didn't get into your choice of program, which at that time seems life-altering, but
sure, I'm sure it was devastating to you.
Yeah, but now when you look back, you're like, child, you have no idea what's coming up. But it's
that's right.
But as you become an adult, everything from financial security to, I had a divorce at an early age and everything. So I think coming to this country as a first-generation immigrant without any financial safety net, I would not go back and change a single thing. Like I would do all those hardships. And if I could, I'd even crank up the hard mode a little bit more. I think 20s and 30s, especially 20s, are for if you're in a video game, play it at the hardest mode possible. Because you have so many safety nets in your 20s, that you have your parents, you have, you have fallbacks. I feel like that is the time to mess it up, to play it at the hardest mode, and to build that muscle of resilience. Like, I think my superpower is that I could come up with all of the worst case scenarios in my life. And I'll be like, a lot of them could be absolutely devastating, but I know I'll be okay.
That is a huge superpower.
I think so.
I mean, I can make an argument that it might be one of the most impactful and critical one. In order to problem solve, you have to first get through the hardship to start working towards the solution. And a lot of people are frozen in that hardship, in that moment where it's most difficult, most disappointing, where it didn't work out exactly right, and it's hard to recover for some people emotionally. If that's something that you have grown as a superpower, it allows you to process and then move forward.
Every time I've seen myself go through a hardship, I've come out stronger with better, healthier coping mechanisms. But the one thing I've done every single time is worked hard. So my one of my biggest coping mechanisms is I actually just end up working hard. I was at one point in time working at the World Bank, going to university, doing my second master's degree, and running the budding of a small business, what it is today. All of that at the same time. And I always imagine, I'm like, when you hit rock bottom, the one thing you end up getting is freedom of time. There is no opportunity, because what is the opportunity cost? You're going to sit down and feel miserable about yourself. That is literally the opportunity cost of your hour. So might as well put that into something productive. So I actually get very, very, very productive when hardship hits. And I think I don't know if it's healthy or not, but it gets me through.
Who am I to say? Who are any of us to say what is healthy for you or not? If you feel healthy and it's working for you, then keep doing it. Early on in my professional career, I witnessed somebody who was older, more seasoned in their career. They had taken some time off for one reason or another. And I saw what that extended time off did to that person. They slowed down. They lost the edge that they had. They were not staying up to date with modern trends and technology innovations and industry standards. He lost his edge. He lost that competitive nature, but also that work ethic, almost got a little bit too comfortable and never really emerged back into that professional world. And that always resonated with me, regardless of how hard you have worked before and the outcome of that as any measure of success. Looking at these years in your 20s, 30s, and even 40s, I would argue, as I am now in my 40s, is that this is the time that I have the energy, the time, the capacity, the interest, the curiosity. Energy is a big part of it. I've continuously reminded myself that I enjoy working hard. I enjoy exploring new things and trying new things and hard work now, mostly because I've got that energy and I've got that time and I've got that capacity. And I want to work very hard now. So that way later, when I don't want to work as hard or as much or take the same kinds of risks, later I can afford, and I don't just mean financially, in many ways, I can feel satisfied, satiated, fulfilled that I have done that in the previous number of decades. And God willing, I see those years healthy and ripe, but I don't want to slow down now. I don't want to slow down. I've got a lot more to offer and to give, and I want to use these years and this energy while I have it.
That is so, so inspiring, Noah. I think this is what makes maybe entrepreneurs or people that keep innovating so exciting. And so, I think they're very interesting, because I think that my biggest worry is to become irrelevant.
Mm.
I never want to operate at the averages. Means, like just medians, means,
Yeah.
they don't interest me, right? Outliers interest me. Like, I don't care what it is that I'm doing. I need to be the absolute best at it. And that doesn't mean, like you said, it's not financial. It's that skill, I should hone it so much. I should build it as a muscle. Whether it's public speaking, whether it's entrepreneurship, whether it's time management, whatever it is, right? And everything, just do it so well that you get so much pride out of it that you want to shout it out from the rooftops. That's that spark. You see it in people when they talk about it. And obviously, it's very evident in you. Right? Like you said, I don't want to slow down. I have no interest in slowing down. I want to keep going. And I know there will be a time to slow down. But I think that time when you slow down will be very gratifying, because we didn't slow down now.
You were essentially an entrepreneur very early on. 13 years ago, you moved to the United States. As you described, having very little, you didn't have a broad network at all. That's an entrepreneur move. You're taking a massive risk in many ways, many definitions of risk.
Right.
And as an entrepreneur for your life, you're building a pathway for yourself. Tell me what that was like.
Born and raised in Pakistan, you have a certain idea, and life was very comfortable in Pakistan. It was very cushy. It was very different. I feel like there's this moment, that pathway, that fork, when you're like, there's two ways this is going to go. And I think there's some times in life that you get this immense clarity of, if I stay on this path, this is what my life is going to look like. I know exactly. And I think I've had that immense clarity. It's like the crystal ball appears and you're like, well, I know exactly what this is going to look like. I'm going to be that woman that lives in Pakistan, has a career, but is like, is a good wife, has like, I mean, I know exactly what the 10, 20 years are going to look like. And that's exactly what has happened to me at these pivotal moments of my life, whether it was, moving to the US or when I left the World Bank. I looked around the office of the World Bank. I'm like, I know exactly what my next 3 promotions are going to look like, what my next 3 decades, like this vice president who's sitting across the floor, that's going to be my office. That's going to be my life. I know exactly how this is going to pan out. Or I can flip this whole thing on its head and have it look completely different.
Yeah.
There is an excitement to that risk. There is an excitement to that change. There is an excitement to that unlimited potential.
Which is scarier for someone like you? Seeing the full vision ahead and where you're going to be over the next 20 years, or scarier to abandon that for the unknown?
I feel like it's scarier to have that much predictability. Like if I know what the next 40 years are going to be exactly like, let's wrap it up right now then.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a way to balance this, right? Like I can't continue seeking uncertainty. So I'm actually a very risk-averse entrepreneur. I call myself a very risk-averse. I'm a very calculated risk taker. But I do think that what excites me is unlimited potential. So if there are still opportunities, if there are avenues that I haven't explored, I'm committed to the path.
I would assume that most entrepreneurs are similar to you. You described yourself as more risk averse because you're calculated. But I think that there is a conflation between calculated risk versus blind risk. I believe that most successful entrepreneurs are successful because they've made certain predictable calculations in order to inform their decision making. It's not that I have this idea and I'm just going to go run blindly into this industry and throw a lot of money at this and just see where it goes. It's that the curiosity has led them to doing enough research and putting enough data points together to make certain calculations about the risk. And once you understand to the best of your ability what those risks might be, as well as maybe assuming that there's going to be some that you don't foresee, is it palatable? Can I tolerate that level of risk? And most of those people, actually, I would say all of them, if they've been successful, have said yes to that. They've accepted that risk and said, this is enough for me to tolerate and enough for me to then push forward on my curiosity.
100%. And I think that skill is evidence-based decision making, right? I think that's such an important skill. Because for me, and I think World Bank taught me this, so economics taught me this. So as a quantitative researcher, you have to collect enough data points that then the policy decision you make, so whether it's going to be student loans versus scholarships, you have to have enough data to go off of to be like, this is the policy decision we're going to make. And I took all of that research, that methodology to my own life saying, all right, you know what? What is that evidence-based decision making that I can do? Where I'm now watching all of these outcomes. This is the life of a tech entrepreneur. This is the life of an international development economist at the World Bank. These are how they compare. These are how they're different. These are the risks associated with each. Which one do I want to take, right? And I think evidence-based decision-making is a skill that has been very useful in my career.
Totally. Now that you identified that, I'd love to get your perspective on a topic directly related to what we just talked about, evidence-based decision-making. One of our previous guests, his name is Tej Stouffer. He was talking about data points. He was talking about how you balance hard data with maybe soft data. And I'm curious for somebody like you who is evidence-based decision driven and you take calculated risks, you put a lot of effort into predicting based on calculations, the outcomes and the risk tolerance. One of the things that he talks about are what I would describe as soft data, and he describes as experience-based data points. So I would say that most entrepreneurs are forging a path based on both what they believe is true based on the data points of the audience in the market and what is wanted and needed. But you have to also have a level of intuition because those data points don't exist. So I'm curious, somebody who's so data-driven and maybe calculated in your predictable risk modeling, how do you then also take some of your emotional intelligence and some of your intuition and instincts and feelings, and how do you make those data points that you are going to believe?
I think an entrepreneur has to have a certain level of optimistic delusion. Like if you think about it, 10% of all startups fail. 2% of women founders ever end up raising a single dollar from VC funding. I've been on this journey for 3 years. We've raised $2.6 million from investors like Paris Hilton, Randy Zuckerberg, Blackman's family office. Really cool cap table. We have 180,000 users, 2 million game plays. We're now on the path to profitability. This is my first ever tech startup, right? So it's like, if I look at it, I could have been all of that data. Like, I mean, if the economist in me looks at this, it's like 10% success rate and 2% chances that you're going to get funding, like walk away, woman, right? Like, I mean, if we go back to evidence-based decision making, but a huge data point that I had was, yes, these are the stats, but I also know you. And I know you as a person, and I know that if there's anyone who can deny these data points, it's you, right? So I think there's that optimistic delusion that I have about myself, which I think every entrepreneur has, is like, I know they all fail, but I won't. Every single entrepreneur believes they're that 10%. Like they defy all math, all stats, right? And everything, because they're like, no. Everyone else will fail. When they look around the room, they're like, well, sorry, you're going to be that 90%, but I'm not. And I think that that's how that mix comes in. So I completely agree. Maybe that soft data, for me, that soft data point was knowing my own level of grit, my own level of ability to stay persistent. And I truly believe in entrepreneurship, only one thing is required. Show up every single day.
Yeah.
You show up every single day, the consistency, up and down, you zoom out, it's an upward curve.
A couple of years ago, I was talking to somebody about an idea and partnering on it. And his executive coach had him fill out an assessment. The one that his executive coach had him take was the Colby A Index. Why? Because it had all these verticals of strengths and skills.
Right.
And of those assessments, when you are partnering with somebody, how can we now look at our complementary skills? So if both of you are poor on follow-up action, well, nothing's going to get accomplished.
Yeah.
If both of you score pretty high on the effective communication assessment, fantastic. Then that's going to be a good strength for your team. I guess what I'm saying is it might be beneficial for anyone out there as an individual founder for something. You might consider taking one of the assessments to recognize some of your strengths, blind spots, weaknesses, and recognize if some of those things don't exist that are necessary to enable you to be successful potentially, or to push you towards the possibility of success. Figure out if you need a partner, somebody to co-found an idea with that is going to offset some of those. And if there are some areas where you know you're weaker in that you can work on, this will help you identify those and give you maybe the direction for overcoming some of those deficiencies, weaknesses, and skills that you can build up to help you be more successful.
No, I saw that play out in my life because I kind of like started it, but very quickly on, I looped in my brother into it. I now have looped in my husband into it. Now they're both my co-founders. So I didn't start being like, I need 3 co-founders. Let me go look for them. What you said very early on in our conversation was the support network. And I think one part of emotional intelligence is knowing your own gaps and kind of knowing what kind of people complement, you as a founder, as a person, whichever one, and then kind of building those into your support system. Like, I mean, that whole thing of like, you're a product of the 5 people you spend your most time with, being very intentional about who those people are and how they complement kind of the gaps. Like, I don't like mundane, detail-oriented everyday tasks. I'm very big vision. Let's go have a conversation, tell the story. But my day-to-day operations are managed by my brother. I mean, he manages a team of 28 developers, quality assurance, testing, all of that. That's him. Like, he is so good at that. And that's something that he's able to do so much better than I can even imagine doing. It's like, and it's just a different kind of personality that's very complementary.
For me, one of the biggest things that was a takeaway in the last 10 years of being more sensitive towards diversity is the diversity of perspective, thought, and experience. That changed the whole way I think about something as simple as just a meeting. Is this an echo chamber? Are there 4 people in this room who all think along the same lines and have the same exact skills and background experience? That's not going to challenge us. We're not going to poke holes in our theories if that's the case. And so diversity to me also means that you are building a diverse team.
Yes.
And especially at the early stages of startup, making sure that you have diversity of skills, diversity of perspective and thought to make sure that you have people that will challenge your notions, people that will challenge your ideas and thoughts and perspective on things to make sure that you're always asking, well, is this the right choice? Is this the right decision? How do I know that this is the right decision?
I love that so much, Noah, because one of my strongest superpowers of being a gaming founder is that I didn't come from the gaming industry. When I started, I used to look at it as one of the biggest weaknesses. I had the imposter syndrome and I was like, I don't belong. I don't understand. I'm not a coder. I'm not an engineer. I have never studied game design. Like what makes me a good gaming founder? And
Yeah.
I think all of the things that I've done with my tech startup is like go to bite-sized games, go to simple games, all of these decisions that we've taken that are very against the tide of where the industry is going. The investors I had the hardest time talking to were the gaming investors because they were like, no, but this is what the industry is doing. What are you talking about? Where are you going
Right.
with this? And this is not going to work. This is not going to work. This is not going to work. And I actually feel like experts, there's so much framework and they know so much depth that it's harder for them to disconnect. Like we were saying, the zoom in versus zoom out sometimes. And sometimes coming at this from just like a place of almost ignorance is you have that unlimited creativity. You're like, wait, but why could it not be that way? I have no idea why it couldn't be that way. And that's kind of what we did. We changed how video games are being created with no code in 15 minutes, how they're being used for education, for social impact marketing, whatever. I'm like, everything's possible, right? And everything. And I think that everything is possible may have been because I've never been in the gaming. I didn't have 10 years of being trained into me, like, hey, this is what's possible and this isn't. And I think it's exactly what you're saying is like that diversity of perspective was just, I'm going to be a gaming founder because I want to change how video games are created and used.
One of the things that was somewhat frustrating, but also hilarious to me as my children were young but growing, they would ask questions that are not rooted in the limitations of our known physical environment. They would ask questions because of their lack of exposure and experience and knowledge of how our world works. Those are the questions we know to ask because we have many years of experience living in this world and the physics that we're bound by. But children will ask questions that make no sense to adults. And there's something actually beautiful about that because what that shows is it's demonstrating diversity of thought and perspective. They don't know the right questions, so to speak.
Yeah.
They will ask questions that we would perceive as the quote unquote wrong questions. But are they wrong? So if you can figure out a way in the real world as an adult, either personally speaking or in your business, to find people who don't know the quote unquote right and wrong questions, you might actually expose new discoveries and interesting concepts that you didn't even think about. Maybe you thought that they weren't possible, but maybe you just weren't asking the right questions because you're too much of an expert at this point.
We'll go to a sports game and I'll be like, well, we're standing here and now it started raining and we're waiting. What if a QR code came up and we could play a game and then go use that discount code at the concession stand or something like that? So, right. So it's like, I mean, my brain's always like, or like I'll be watching something and I was like, how did you make this? How did they make that happen? And I think that curiosity, which you were talking about earlier, is the thing that really drives innovation. And I think anyone who's had a shower has had an idea. But I think if you can out execute others at implementing that idea and failing at that idea and then learning from it, the time that it's taking someone else to come up with a plan and a focus group, I've already gone, done it, built it. My team has already failed at it and we've pivoted 3 times. So I think the speed of execution is just really, really cool when you follow it up with that diversity of thought.
That's the whole concept of the MVP. The minimum viable product is that if you wait so long as to try to envision and build the perfect model, the perfect platform, it just will never happen because by the time you actually execute and build it, it's either already outdated or more likely you have made false assumptions about things that weren't important and you focused on the wrong stuff altogether. But you start with what you believe to be the most important thing and then start building around it and iteration, as you described.
I mean, the LinkedIn founder said, if you're not embarrassed of the first version of your product, you've launched too late.
Yeah. Wow. What a great quote.
I mean, if you're not embarrassed of it, if you think it's perfect, you're like so proud of what you're putting out there, too late.
Yeah.
The first version, you should be embarrassed of. It shouldn't be perfect. But go launch it, learn from it, and build it in public. I actually build in public. I don't think there's such a thing as building in stealth. I do it every single day. I get feedback on it every single day. We're in touch with the community. I built a minimum viable community before we built a minimum viable product. And I think that's something that's really important to do.
Can you describe what that means by minimum viable community?
I am obviously not going to take credit for that term. Minimum viable community, Alexis Ohanian, he's Serena Williams' husband, Reddit co-founder. he talks about this a lot. Minimum viable community is having a group of people that you can kind of stress test your idea with, like having your hand in the pulse, even before you start building a product. And minimum viable community is actually usually around the founder, around the person, less around the product. So it's like saying, hey, you know what? I am Noah. I'm building a minimum viable community through my podcast. In the future, I may end up building a personality assessment platform, right? So even before you've ever gone to your product, you now already have a community built in. And I think there's a huge difference between community and audience. Audience is one way, you talk at them, you talk to them. Community is two-way, they talk back, you talk. It's a flow of ideas and conversation. And I think that the idea of having a minimum viable community that's beyond your friends and family that love you so much that they're just going to give you, they're going to be like, yeah, that's a great idea. Go do it. I'm going to I love you, so I support you. I think it's really, really important to have people. And the way I built that was on Twitter in the beginning. And now I do it on LinkedIn, is just building in public the founder journey. And all of a sudden you have these people from different kinds of backgrounds. They're not from the gaming world. They're not from the tech world. But there's so many different kinds of backgrounds that are like, hey, did you think about that? Well, what are you doing with this problem? Now I have asked you guys, can you make an intro to a lawyer or to an accountant? It's such a superpower to have before you even launch your minimum viable product, is to have a minimum viable community.
We jumped really quickly into talking a little bit about the work that you're doing, but we didn't really define and understand what that journey was like leaving the World Bank, why you left, and what you're doing.
I am the founder of a no-code game maker platform. It's called Breshna. It's kind of like the Canva for video games. So the big idea is that anyone can make their own video games, no coding, no design skills, but they can do it for education, for marketing, for social impact. So Super Mario game where you're catching even numbers and dodging odd numbers, that kind of idea. So really bite-sized games that you can make on your own. While I was at the World Bank, on the side, we were running a gaming studio where we were the ones making video games on financial literacy, climate action, all of this different stuff. And very quickly, I realized that rather than us making the games, the demand for these games was so high that we need to empower people to make the game. The world is ready. What Canva did for design, what TikTok did for video, the world is ready for the TikTok for video game. And that was kind of that beginning, that idea, where then once I had that idea, I just couldn't sleep on it. So the calculated risk taker side of me was like, the World Bank pays me a good salary. I have a mortgage, all of that stuff. How am I going to go be a tech entrepreneur now? So I gave myself the target of $1 million in VC funding, of saying, when I raise $1 million, I'm going to go quit my job. Told my manager, told the investors that I have this goal, that if I meet that goal, I'm going to go do that. And we exceeded that goal to 2.6 million. But I went to my manager and I was like, I want to quit my job. And she said, don't quit. I'll hold your job for 2 years. Take a sabbatical. I'll be here. We'll hold your job. After 2 years, I went back and she's like, do you want me to extend your sabbatical? And I was like, no, I'm out of here. So yeah, that was the transition.
You described your father was very supportive and forging your own path, and he was proud of you. What did that support look like in the following months and years after you left and when you're on your own? From your family?
From family, yeah. I think what's really interesting, Noah, is like, when they say it takes a village to like raise a kid or it takes a village to build a company, it really does take a village. And I think that there's so many different ways that people show up in, whether it's like my husband being like, I think you need a walk. Let's go for a walk. I think you need to just talk things out. Or whether it's a manager of mine who's like, hey, I don't know what's going on. People don't leave the World Bank at the peak of their career. So take your 2 years. We hold your job for you. You might come back, but like have a financial safety net. I think there's people that have had these impacts in my life, or if it's an investor who takes a chance on you, right? Like, I mean, raising VC funding when you just have an idea on a paper is something that's really hard to do. And those are the people that take a chance on you. So I think in your early stages, when you're not successful, when you don't have the accolades and the awards and the accomplishments, the people who take a chance on you is the part of that support system. And I think part of that responsibility is then to make sure that when you're on that mountaintop, you don't forget about those people.
Did your economics background give you maybe an advantage in starting a business?
For numbers, yes, 100%, right? So and actually this is like unfortunate. I see a lot of female founders being like, I'm great at my idea and everything, but the business part, the money part, like my husband manages or something. My husband is my CFO, but I have made it a point to understand all of my numbers. So I'm like, what's our return on investment? What's happening? What's our valuation? And I think that's a really important part of understood the technical aspect of the finances. I mean, I think I have a good grasp on that. But I honestly think the thing that came out of the World Bank experience the most was a different lens at solutions. So being like, here's a problem, financial literacy. Here's a video game. Now let's mix them up together. And now we're solving financial literacy with video games. That kind of an approach. This is very different from my usual podcast, what's it like being a founder conversation. So I really enjoyed it. I'm going to send it to my dad for sure.
Good. I hope you do. I hope you send it to everyone. The hope is that anyone listening can identify some of their own strengths and skills by way of hearing of others and say, yeah, I've got that too. And I do that too. And I'm very good at that. And here's how I've seen them apply it. So hopefully it is an inspiration and strength to others listening.
I really do think on that, Noah. I feel like it's one of those things where it's like, doesn't matter what you studied, doesn't matter what you trained on. We live in a world where you can reskill, retrain, upskill at any point in time. And I think that is the luxury of technology. That is the luxury of time. And I really, truly do believe that if there's one thing that listeners get out of this, is not that, hey, I should have that skill to get on that path, but that I have this superpower of mine and I can take any skill and craft any path out of it, right? I think that limitless ambition is very, very possible in the world that we live in today. And I think that's the cool thing about kind of the conversations you're having is just look at all these different stories, look at all these different trajectories. Who could have imagined the third grader in Pakistan would be a gaming tech entrepreneur? And you can just have any pathway that you want to your life, irrespective of skills, background, all of those things.
I agree. It's not to tell people that they can go from economics into game tech entrepreneurship. It's that the skills that are utilized in economics can be used in many other ways and to your advantage, regardless of what you want to do. The question is, what is your lens? What is the filter with which you are applying and seeing through your vision?
And that's the founder market fit that they talk about. It's like why you're the best person for this job and every one person is the best person for a job.
Oh, Mariam, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Noah. No, I really appreciate you hosting, making room. Hope to stay in touch.
I want to thank Ephraim Epstein for recommending Mariam as today's guest, and to you, our listeners, for joining us on this episode of Transferable Skills. Remember, if you found value in today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and share it with your friends and network. Your support helps us reach more people who could benefit from these stories. Transferable Skills is produced by Cackle Media and music by Cosmonkey. This episode was edited by Aaron Wertheimer. For more resources and inspiration on leveraging your skills for a successful career transition, visit our website at cacklemedia.com. Follow us on social platforms at Cackle Media for updates and join our community of listeners who are all about embracing change and growth. If you have any questions, feedback, or want to share your own career pivot story, email us at skills@cacklemedia.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for listening. And remember, the skills you've gained can take you anywhere. Until next time, keep exploring those transferable skills.